Hi, folks. I screwed up again. Anyway, thank you all for showing up. I can't believe I screwed up again. I forgot to hit live. I did everything else right, and I keep forgetting to hit live. Anyway, I'll figure it out. Anyway, I've got a lot of questions that came in. A lot of phone calls that came in, and I still didn't get a thoroughbred trainer to come on. Let me answer a couple of these questions. You have a bunch lined up too, right? Okay, let me answer this one. The first one is from Alex. He says, I mentioned this to Larry about syndicates last podcast. It's for sure an issue. I guess he's talking about syndications or syndicates. Or I'm not sure. Well, you think he means betting syndicates? I think he means syndicating horses. I think. Well, I'll address syndicating horses because that's what he says. I mentioned this to Larry about syndicates. That has to be syndicates horses, syndicating horses. No,
I don't remember.
Oh well. He says he mentioned it last week, so I'll just talk about syndicating horses. Maybe he asked that question because sees the Gray has like 2,500 owners, and I know one thing because I started a syndication when I first got bought in 2016. I mentioned this once before, but it's probably a bunch out there don't know about this. I started a company because I couldn't go on the racetrack. I started a company called American Heritage Standardbred Sales, and what it was I put together a beautiful brochure which I showed, and I have it here someplace. But when I did the podcast about it, I showed the brochure, and I mailed it out to 5,000 doctors, 5,000 lawyers, and 5,000 money management firms. And within maybe 3 or 4 weeks, I got $60 million worth of responses. And I put down for the money management firms, I put down that any money manager that gets me some clients, I'll give them back 10% in cash. And what it was just form syndicates, get 10, 15 people, buy a bunch of horses, and I would manage them off the racetrack. I'd hire trainers and everything. I would manage them for 10% of the earnings. And that's what I did. Anyway, I won't go through the whole thing, but within probably a month, state police come up with, and they shut me down. They said I couldn't do this, and I had to give the money back, or I'd go to jail for all kinds of different stuff. And I wind up shutting down, giving the money back. But I think I might have been the first one, or one of the first ones, to kind of do this with standardbreds. But when I went with Alan Seawall, when I undercover, there was a guy they called Bob Hutt, one of his owners, and I mentioned it to him, and he created Fantasy Lane Stable with thoroughbreds, and they were very, very successful. In fact, that might still be around today. I know Bob Hutt's some kind of big shot with thoroughbred racing now, and he's a real good guy. In fact, he bought my book, and he gave me an unbelievable review in the book. And if I don't know if he's listening or not, but if you are, Bob, thank you for that great review. And I don't understand how Seize the Gray, how Wayne Lucas got, I think it's 2,570 owners on one horse, because I think the rule is to be licensed. You must own 5% of a horse or more. So that means 20 people could be licensed out of that 2,700, and the rest of them just own 0.5% or 1% or whatever. And it's a way to get involved, but only 5%. People that own 5% or more could could get involved. It's a good way to get involved, get your feet wet. If you're not sure about getting into the business, it's a good way. And there's a bunch of these, a lot of trainers do that now. They form syndicates, and with 15, 20 people, you each put in 5,000 or 2,000, whatever. And you buy a horse and you see if you like it. And that's what happened with Fantasy Lane with Bob Hutt. And there were a lot of people after the first year. They were all excited about it. And they stayed with it, and they all became individual owners. I hope that's what you meant, Alex. But there's a lot of that going around now, and I hope that answers your question. You want to say something before I go into? I got a bunch of them here.
Well, Baywatch is here. Vic Mize, Patrick Smith, Tom Kopp is in, so that's good. You can respond to his things when you're ready. JW, John Maida. Vic, right off the bat, asked Larry, were there any drivers you couldn't get to lay down in a race at any tracks, especially?
Were there any drivers I couldn't get to lay down in the race? Well, I'll tell you this, especially once I got thrown out of Yonkers and I saw going to all them Mickey Mouse tracks, it wasn't hard to find people. They were racing for no money. Half of them were living in tack rooms, and this is in the 60s now, and it wasn't hard to find. You just know. You could just, when you approach somebody, you look in their eyes, and they're just hungry. It just, and it don't take much at these small tracks. And once you get one guy, he's at your door every day. He'll come right to your barn. I have a horse in Wednesday. I have one in Thursday, and it's sad, but that's the truth. And that's the reality of the horse business at these smaller tracks. I remember when I raced at Monticello in the 70s, the minimum purse I think was $800 or $1,000, and I think the purse today, and we're talking about 50 years later, is still the same, $1,000 minimum purse. And but back then it cost $20-30 to shoe a horse. Today it's 120. So everything went up a lot except the purse money. And I could do 15 hours on that. Were they guys that I couldn't get to? Yeah, but I knew the guys I couldn't get to. I knew the guys I could get to, and I knew the guys I couldn't get to. I certainly wasn't going to go up to Stanley Dance or Billy Houghton or John Campbell and say, listen, will you take 5,000 to be worse than third? I wouldn't do that. You just know. You know who to go to. And I don't think I was ever turned down. Now with the thoroughbreds, from what I understand, and I got a little bit involved when I first got involved with Con Erico, which, by the way, next week we're going to have Con Erico's nephew on, and he's going to talk about his growing up with Con, talk about what he knew I was doing with Con and Tony Shula. He's going to talk a lot about that, how, when, where, how he got in there and everything else. But when I got involved a little bit with that, and offers were made to these jockeys, some of them were more interested in cocaine. They if you offer them 3,000-4,000, they'd say, can you get me some cocaine, and we'll knock some of the price off. I never did that, but and then when you gave them the money back in the 70s, when I was doing it, cocaine was big. 70s and 80s, everybody was doing it. Nobody knew the dangers of it. They all thought it was great. It was like a party thing, and a lot of them did it. There were no tests for it back then, and a lot of the jockeys and drivers too, they were going out there whacked out of their mind. But a lot of them, they would rather get, if you gave them a kilo of cocaine, they'd probably stiff every horse they were on for the next 5 years. But anyway, you know who to approach and who not to approach.
Patrick Smith asked a question in a prior podcast. He's back and he's asking about how come the horses are so much faster than they were in the 70s and the 80s today. He says, I know that they changed the bike in the late 70s. Is that much of a factor? Or?
No, there were a lot of factors. The first factor is the breed. They bred out, especially in standardbreds. They bred out a lot of lameness. In other words, they were. Let's see. I can't mention stallions because nobody's going to know what the hell I'm talking about. But there was a stallion. I won't even mention stallions and their defects. But if a horse was prone to bow tendons, they wouldn't breed that horse. And they year by year they bred out a lot of the hereditary ailments that horses would have. So that's one reason and then naturally they bred the best of the best, and the breeding became more of a business, and pretty sophisticated people got involved, and there were certain crosses, and they really made a study of the bloodlines and everything, and the breed just got better and better and better. I remember in the 50s to get a horse to pace, it was like a month or 2 month ordeal with 3/4 inch leather hobbles, tighten them right up, and they'd burn like hell until they learn little by little, they learn how to pace. Now they're born and they run in the field as yearlings pacing. So the breed got better. It got more refined years back. The breed was a lot heavier and thicker, and you could very easily tell a thoroughbred from a standardbred. Today, it'd be you'd have to be pretty educated to horsemen to be able to tell some thoroughbreds from some thoroughbreds. They look very similar. And then the race bikes that Kurt Watson created, they made a big difference. They made such a difference that some of the programs will mock that they had a modified bike on them back in the 70s and 80s. So that helped. The track conditions helped, and banks and the turns helped, and then back then most of the tracks were half-mile tracks. Now they're mile tracks, 5 8-mile tracks, and that helped a little. And I guess that's it. Just between the breed, the equipment, and that's why they're going faster. Now, also, I want to mention this before because somebody asked me a question, and it's a pretty interesting question, almost without an answer. And the question is that I think the guy was at the Meadowlands one night, and a $10,000 claimer went in 152. And then the open pace went in 152. And a 10,000 claimer is worth $10,000. And every horse in the open pace is probably worth well over $100,000. So how could both class of horses go the same speed? And that's a good question. But I will tell you this, because the answer is class. And how do you define class? I don't know how to define class, but I know one thing. If the horse that win a 10,000 claimer in 152 was put in a race with the open pacer or the preferred pacer that won in 152, same identical times, same identical fractions, the 10,000 claimer would finish 30 lengths behind the other horse. Now, it's hard to define class, but it's like, okay, let's say you go a quarter in 30 seconds. The preferred pacer would go 1/8 of a mile off the gate in maybe 13 seconds, where the 10,000 claimer would have to go 14 seconds. and each second is 5 lengths. So a couple of seconds is 10 lengths. So I don't know any other way to define class except if you go into a bar and you're looking to fight somebody and you walk down and you take a look at everybody without ever talking to them, you know the guy to fuck with and the guy not to fuck with. So I don't know how else to define class, but I hope that answers the question from a way back. Anyway.
Tom Kopp, he had a lot of observations while Scott was speaking last week, and like some questions in there. He said you can't use iodine or DMSO anymore. That's kind of ridiculous. And he also asked, you can't blister or freeze a splint. He said these rules.
Well, first of all, in the thoroughbreds, that's absolutely true. If the vet comes around every morning to look at every horse and make you run them up and down the morning of the race, just to pass them soundness wise and health wise. And if they find one piece of scurf, I don't care if it came from blue lotion or whatever, the horse is scratched instantly, which is really idiotic. But I don't want to get into that, because in the standardbred business, many of these horses, especially back when I was racing, they have some problems, and there is no such thing as a sound horse. Even with the thoroughbreds, there's no such thing as a racehorse that's 100% sound. There's just no such thing. They have a problem and they have an ailment someplace. More so with the standardbreds, because we race every 7 days, and you're expected to race every 7 days, and you better race every 7 days or to take the stalls away from you. So when these problems come up, whether it be an ankle that just under a little stress and just got a little swollen, or a tendon or a ligament, or maybe tore a ligament. With the standardbreds, we kind of went right on. And you start with these, and some of them back then in the 60s, 50s, and they were cruel. I mean, it would be like taking a blowtorch to a horse's leg just to create a massive blood supply to the area, so the body would kind of heal itself. So some of them were brutal, but then it got better and better and better, and it kind of perfected. And then DMSO come into the picture, I think, in the 60s, and that was a drawing agent. It drew. If you mix it with iodine, it would make the body absorb it faster. And then they things got a little better. And I remember when they first come out with many horses pop splints, especially standardbreds. And the thing with a splint, it's a bone that kind of separates or snaps off, because it's an extension of years ago when they were first come around. They had a split hoof, and through generations and generations, the hoof became one. But what happened to that the other one, they had like I think they had three like a cow. They had three separate feet. Now they have one, and then three, the one on each side. It kind of through time, it kind of shrunk up, and now it created a splint bone on each side of the cannon bone. They were, a million years ago, they were part of the foot. But then at the end, they're attached to the coffin, to the cannon bone, and then at the end, on the top and the bottom, they just kind of stick out a little, just like a Q-tip. And sometimes them things break off. And years ago, you either operated and took the piece out, or if it just cracked, you would blister it and get massive blood to that area. And all the time, just trying to go on with them. And then they come up with radium pellets. Radium pellets seem to work the best. They'd inject 5 or 6 or 7 into that area, with the splint area, the broken splint bone. And they even were doing it with curbs. I can't get into that because you're not going to understand it. But they were 2 or 3 veterinarians that got very sick, and I think it was Dr. Carter who actually died from radiation poisoning, and then the only one that was left doing it was Dr. Sadowski, and he kept doing it, and he couldn't get nobody to help him. But I went around and I helped him until they stopped him from doing it. So it's I guess it's a humane thing why they're stopping it, and that's good for the horse, and just let the body heal naturally and give him plenty of time. But if you have a thoroughbred and you're paying $150 a day, you don't want to hear that shit, you know. And the same thing with the standardbreds. You know, you're paying $70, $80 a day, and you could blister the horse and get him back to the races in a couple of weeks, so you could let the body heal naturally. It'd take a few months, and then another couple of months getting them back. You know, these are the decisions that have to be made. And most of the times, it's decisions that have to be made because of lameness. And with lameness, you have to do what you have to do. Now, the easy thing is, you know, an ankle joint, because don't forget, these horses now, they're racing hard, whether they be standardbreds or thoroughbreds. And the standardbreds, every 4 or 5 days, they're either training or racing, and they need help. They need a little help. And I think in the 50s or 60s, cortisone came into the picture. And I remember Dr. Steele was injecting Stanley Dance's 2-year-olds, their ankles with cortisone, and that's it. But now I think, especially now, because of HISA and all these new rules and regulations, you can't even do that. And I think the kid I had on Tuesday, he spoke about that, and it's sad because they're trying to slam the door completely, hoping that would stop the drugs. In the meantime, the horses are getting no help for rehabilitation. Anyway, I go ahead.
John might ask what the difference between a pin fire and freeze fire.
Well, one is with a hot iron and one is with freezing. One is with a, you know, pin fire. That's what they did years ago. They get a hot, just like a soldering iron with a point. Wow. That's why they call it pin fire. And it get red hot. Naturally, you have the horse tranquilized, and the area that you were going to pin fire would be blocked off. You know, just like when you're going to get your tooth drilled or pulled, you get a block. You would block that whole area so they wouldn't feel it. And then you get this hot iron that has a point on the end, and maybe every quarter of an inch, half inch apart, and you would do the whole area. And that in an effort to create scar tissue and a massive blood supply to that area. And that would promote healing a whole lot quicker than if you just left them alone. But after 4 or 5 hours, the horses, the block wears off, and the horse feels that pain, and it's kind of cruel. And then they came up with eliminated that, and they came up with the freeze firing, which was a whole lot better.
Fanny Buster asked, does Larry have a favorite horse from his past?
Yeah, I have 2 or 3. And one of them I had was Chester Direct, and that was the horse that got me in trouble at Yonkers, because I claimed Chester Direct from Carmine Anthony Abatello, I think, for $2,500 at Roosevelt Raceway the first year I was there, and I claimed him with the money that Tommy Lucchese gave me, and I win 3 or 4 in a row with him. And I created the mortal sin. I fell in love with the racehorse, and I went into the race secretary at Yonkers, and I says, could you do me a favor and classify this horse, put him in the ABC, you know? because
You didn't want to lose
I
him.
didn't want to lose them. You know, I won in 25. I won in 3,000. I won in 4,000 claimers. I put him in, I think, 7,500 claimers, something like that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
But anyway, I didn't want to lose him. He was winning all the way and getting better. He had a couple of bow tendons, and I got lucky treating them. And the race secretary told me, he says, Larry, he says he's an aged horse, and any aged horse that wants to be classified has to start out in B3, and B3 is like 5 classes higher than you were in the 5,000 or 6,000 claimer. They're much tougher horses. So he says, I think and he was nice. He says, I think you're making a mistake, young man. And I says, well, let me just give it a shot. And it was the wrong move on my part, because number one, you should never fall in love with a horse. And number two, he had 2 bow tendons. Well, why not just keep him in the whole world knew he had 2 bow tendons. You had to be crazy to claim him. But I just didn't want to lose him. And the worst part is he's racing against much tougher horses, and he's going to have to go faster, you know. And but anyway, I put him in. He put him in B3, and the program comes out, and that was the race where at the half-mile pole I was sitting third, the death seat. And at the half-mile pole, I had a chance to come out. Here they come. Insko with his famous 3/8 pole move. He come up, and at that point, going to the half on a half-mile track, I had to make a decision: either come out and be first over against much tougher horses than he'd been racing against, or sit in. I sat in, hoping that I'd get out down the stretch. Well, I didn't get out down the stretch, and I finished third, I think, climbing over the winner, went right over his seat. And that was the race. Morty Finder and Tannenbaum bet $10,000 to win on me. Morty Finder told Tannenbaum I stiffed the horse because I didn't come out, and that's when Tannenbaum threw me out of Yonkers. Did I answer the question?
I believe so.
No.
Anthony Gichiara says you don't deserve all the credit for that award. Without his participation, you would. Anthony,
here it is. Here it is. Anthony was the one for you guys that 2 podcasts ago, I says, you sure you know what you're doing? He says, yeah. So I put him on the show, and all we heard was screeching and yelling and him laughing. And all I kept saying was, I can't hear you. I can't hear you. I can't hear you. And this went on. So I disconnected him and come back on 3 different times. And then because of that, I got this award. Now, can you see the award for you, those who didn't see it? It says Achievement Award. This certifies that Against All Odds podcast number 63, and they named it Can You Hear Me Now, has been awarded the most fucked up podcast on YouTube. And you're right, Anthony. You deserve you deserve part of the credit. You're going to be on next week. I just told the people that you're going to be on next week. Anthony is the nephew of Con Erico, and his father, Anthony's father, was Con Erico's brother, and he could tell of what went on with me and Tony Schuler and Con Erico and all the races that we set up at Aqueduct and Belmont. But he'll be on to tell you that story and explain a little bit to himself, because his brother worked for me. But anyway, go ahead.
Here's a good one from Glenn Whitman. Larry, do you feel that if you were allowed to drive when you first started, that you were in the same class as the greats, Horton, Schulte, and others? How would you rate yourself as a driver? I think someone else should respond to that.
No. I'm going to respond to that. You know, I'm going to respond to that because just this morning in the bagel place where we go, you know that guy that sits with Anthony, that other guy that I can't think of his name, that nice guy.
That's okay.
I told him to watch a podcast. And the podcast that I did with Soft White Underbelly. And
That's
I
a
says,
great one.
and I
We
says,
should recommend that to everyone. If you haven't seen it, it's
yeah,
really, really good.
it's a, well, I asked them to watch that. I says, rather than go through all my 60 podcasts to learn of my life story, and not even them 60 podcasts are only 1% of my story. There's so much left out. But anyway, I says, why don't you watch this? This producer came up from California maybe 6, 8 months ago, whenever it was. And he called me up. He wanted to do the podcast. So I did it with him. He had a nice studio in Manhattan. I went to the studio, and that's the podcast. It's called Soft White Underbelly, and interview with Larry Rolla. And so he watched that last night, and he come to me this morning, and I says to him, I says, all right, now you watched it. That now what you heard was 10% of the story of my life. And each section that you heard was 10% of that whole thing. I says, but of everything you heard that was really cut and intense, what part did you like the best? And you know what he said? And I think it responds to this question. I think, because I forgot the question already, but I know what I'm going to say now. He says it was the part when you first started out, when you says that you knew at a very young age you were different. All you wanted to do was compete. You had to win at everything that you did. And the part when you says you didn't even want to join a baseball team because you didn't want to be responsible for losing because of somebody else. So you had to be alone in the car or racing or whatever. This way, if you did lose, you would figure out a way how to make yourself better. So when I first started out, I'm not making this up. I got a full-page write-up after 10 drives with a provisional driver against the top guys in the country at that time. And I got a full-page write-up. Stanley Dancer gave me a great review. So did Billy Houghton. So did George Schulte, who were the top 3 guys there at the time. So if I didn't get barred from New York, would I have? I just know I loved it. I had for me, I just great sense of pace. It was just like natural to me. However, if I never got in trouble, I would have stopped driving because I began to realize pretty quick that it was, regardless what anybody said about weight making no difference. Because I loved the game so much, and I always had to win. And if I had to win, and I realized that me being 175 pounds racing against Marvin Maker or somebody that weighed 120 pounds, I don't care about behind the wheels, the weight above the wheels, going from a running start. The weight still makes a difference, and my height too. And there was only a handful of drivers that went the whole route, being as tall as I was. One was Catello Manzi, and one was Doherty and Lonnie Beer, and there was just a handful. All the rest of them are 5'6", 5'5", 140 pounds, and so I would eventually have yielded to these guys, especially because I would have been getting older and everything anyway. But
back at the time when you started, if you hadn't gotten a raw deal, you would have been a sought-after catch driver at that point in time on the New York circuit.
Well, all right. Give me another question.
Team Bitcoin, how are you, buddy? Do you think they should ban Sierra Leone from running since he can't run in a straight line and becomes a hazard to the other horses?
Ain't that the guy that went to sent me an email that
he's the guy that cashed out on Dornock? Yeah, because you told him that bid wasn't going to help him.
Yeah, I think he read. I think I read something that he thanked me. He says because of your opinion or whatever it was that bit, because I said that bit wasn't going to do.
He probably was thinking about using that horse on top, and then after what you said,
I don't think they should. What did they say? Bar him for what?
Like ban him since he can't run.
No. There's so many other things that they could do. And I hate to talk about. I want the guy, he ain't never going to come on, but I want a thoroughbred trainer to come here so we can talk about these things. I don't want to just say, it's so easy. It's so easy for me to criticize somebody that's doing something that ain't working. I mean, yeah, it's easy to do that. And I don't want to do that. But if he was sitting here, the trainer of that horse, he was sitting here, I would have said to him, I would have said, all right, you use that cage bit. Okay, great. It's a steering bit. In other words, it's like taking the pacifier out and giving them a bottle. That's the first step. I mean, there's 100 steps that you could do to correct the problem. That's the first step. Okay. But if you're going to take the first step, do it the right way to solve the problem. And what the problem is? The problem is when you steer them around horses or pull them wide. Okay. So when you're training them with this bit, don't just go to the rail or stay in the 2-horse lane and just go and say, oh, yeah, he steered good. Because the bit steers with the jaw. Put them in the same position as, in other words, as you're coming around the last turn, make believe that 3 horses, there's a car parked right there and you have to steer around them. And just pull them out to the side. And when you get them like this, see if you could straighten him out in time, or see if he's why is he locked on it a bit? Why? But I guarantee he didn't do that. So, but he probably just so. There's many other things, and I think Tuesday, I showed him a bunch of bits that were beginners bits that you could have used. Just put an extension on the left side. This way, when you're rating them with that sign line a bit with the extension on the left side, he's going to be on the left line. He's not going to be even up. He's going to be on the left line. Now, if he's on the left line, he's going to be running out a little bit like this. Now, when you go around other horses, you're going to pull on the right line. But when you're pulling on the right line, it's really creating an even situation. So when he gets like this, because of centrifugal force or whatever, it's going to be easy to straighten him out, because he's not only that, but the snaffle bit that they had probably ran through his mouth, and that bit too. So there was so many things he could do, and I'm sure that he'll figure it out. But he's a fast horse. That horse.
Something was very strange, and there's 2 workouts prior to the race. He worked with another horse. Now, to me, he should have worked on the outside, but in both instances, he was on the rail.
How do you know that?
Because you can watch. There's a channel on here where you can
watch the works.
You can see works, yeah.
And he worked them on the inside of a horse.
Yeah.
When the problem is steering around the horse.
Yeah.
Well, that's hard for me to believe. That's hard for me to believe. But if you say you watched it and saw it, but why the hell would you do that when the problem is just when he's steering around other horses? And then there's another thing. They sideline them bits that are actually tapered, where one side of the bit is very skinny and then it gets thicker and thicker, so they could lock on. So if the thick part of the bit with the extension is on the right side, they're going to lock onto that more than on. There are so many things that he could do, and maybe even just sometimes a line burr. Just put a piece of metal with some rivets sticking out on the line and let that line bounce off. Now the thing, if it's just a line, he's going to stay there. But if he feels the little sharp rivets, he's gonna turn his head to get away from it. Sometimes a simple little thing like that helps. But a horse like Sarah, I mean, that horse is the best of all of them by far. He's probably going to be worth $30-40 million. Straighten the fucking horse out. Good.
Spencer said, I saw it also, Larry, in Team Bitcoin, saying he did work on the inside before the Belmont. So,
well, why would you do that? If his problem is running in after going around other horses, and not only that, but the simplest thing, if the judges called you up and says, listen, I don't care that he was running in, he raced in the Kentucky Derby with that equipment, and he just got beat a lip, you're not changing the equipment, which happens sometimes in racing. You win a race, they don't want you changing equipment. And okay, if that was the case, my instructions to the jockey would be, don't ride tight. That's all. Go around the turn like you're driving a trailer truck. Go wide. Go wide. This way, once you're out there, and then the answer is going to be, yeah, but you're losing a lot of ground. How much fucking ground you losing bumping into horses all the way down the stretch? Anyway, go ahead. Go ahead.
Tom Kopp is skeptical that Anthony will really be on next week.
No,
I think Bitcoin's taking bets on whether we're going to get him in here.
No, it's going to happen because first of all, even though I screwed up again today, I can't believe
Alex Merrill is now in the chat.
Who's
He's
Alex?
the one.
Oh, he's the one that
the syndicate question.
Yeah.
So just he makes statement here that Sierra wasn't good enough. Period. So now you could ask him what syndicate he meant. Maybe it was.
Alex, when where is that? Did I answer the question when you said I mentioned this to Larry about syndicates last podcast? Was it syndications for horses or betting syndicates? I didn't understand. I answered the syndication for horses. So, if you want to get back to me.
Yeah, he could, if he comes in here.
Yeah. Well, I have. All right. Let me answer this. This is let's see. Oh, this question goes back. You know what's happening? People are just now catching up there. This is pertaining to a podcast I did 6 months ago. It says from this
Alex says no betting.
Oh, betting. So I answered the wrong question.
Well,
Are they betting syndicates? I look, I've been out of it a long time. I don't go to racetracks no more. I don't gamble no more. Are they betting syndicates? From what I hear, there's many betting syndicates, and some of them are doing that computer stuff.
Yeah,
and so
computer assisted wagering.
There's a lot going on in that area that I'm not familiar with, so I can't speak to it. But there's a lot going on there. So I can't answer that question. This kid here, I'm going to answer it because his name is Meat Cleaver. So I'm going to answer this question, and this this happened about six podcasts ago. So it says you should have gave them each a paper bag and told them to beat it because you couldn't lose an empire over this petty fix. They would have had more money in their pocket than ever before. Wouldn't have given a shit about the suspension. Giving them a payday and heads up would have taken care of them. Okay, what he's talking about is 1984. 1984 for you guys that don't know, and I'll go through it really quick. 1984, I was riding high. I had a lot of money. I had 7 homes, a full wardrobe in every home. I had almost 100 horses. I had a barn at that training center that they built. That was the name of Sunshine Meadows. In fact, me and Carl LaClaus and Dr. Todd were the first 3 that bought barns there. It was a brand new training center in Boynton Beach. It had 40 stalls in each one. I think we paid $1 million for it. 40 stalls. Yeah, $250,000, I think, a section. And I was doing really well. I had all my horses at the Meadowlands. I hadn't raced it. I left Monticello about 3 years prior. But every Sunday I used to go up to Monticello since my father died to take my mother to lunch. If it was at all possible, I'd go up there, take her to lunch at the racetrack because they had Sunday afternoon racing. And every Sunday I'd take her to the racetrack for lunch, and she enjoyed it. And one Sunday, a kid that used to work for me, who was a trainer driver at the time, he come over to me and he said to me, he says, "You're going to be here for the last race." Now, look, the whole world knew I was fixing the last race every night up there, all the years I was up there. And it went on before me and it went on after I left. So anyway, the kid comes over to me, says, "Here, play these. You going to be here for the last race?" And I said, "Probably." And he says, "Here, play these numbers." I put the piece of paper down on the table and I forgot all about it. I wasn't interested in betting any races. I took my mother there for lunch, and that was it. I didn't bet. I didn't do nothing. So now the next to the last race comes, and I asked the girl for my waitress for the check, and I paid a check and said, "Come on, Ma, let's go." And I always left before the last race because my car was always in valet. The valet guys knew me. They pulled it up front. In the summer months, they had the air on. In the winter, they had the heat on.
Yeah.
And if I didn't come down first, I'd block a whole lane for the valet parking. And so I says, "Come on, Ma, let's go." And she says, so innocently, "Aren't you going to bet what that boy told you to bet?" She thought like if I would go back on my word because I said, "Yeah, I bet." So I says, "Yeah, you want to bet it?" She says, "Well, the boy told you. You told him that." "Okay. Okay, Ma." So I go to the window and I bet the numbers he gave me. I think it was a 4-horse box. And I put down whatever it was. I don't know. Anyway, the race goes off. The crowd starts booing. And I says, look at this. So I run to the window right away and I cash the tickets. I think I got 1,700 back. I don't even remember. But anyway, I come back. I give my mother the money. And they wind up having a big investigation over that race. And next Sunday, I went there with my mother. No problem. 4 or 5 Sundays later, security guy calls me. Now, the security guy that come down to get me, I knew. I got him his job with Slutsky. I knew him. And I says, he says, "Larry," says, they want to see you upstairs in the office." I says, "For what?" I says, "Joe," I says, "why do they want to see me?" "Well, there was a race. I don't want to get involved in none of that shit. I don't race here. I have been racing." He said, No, it ain't like that." Anyway, I go up there. Sure enough, there's a table. There's the state police, harness track security. There's everybody there. And they says, "We have to put you under oath." I says, "You're not putting me under oath." And they says, "Listen, we're having an investigation on this race," he says, "and all we need is a professional opinion if the race was legit or not legit." I should know better, but I fell for the bullshit. I knew I shouldn't have did it, but there was no getting out of there because they told me plain and simple, and we just want your opinion, and we're having an investigation, and because you're licensed by the state, you must participate in any investigation that we have, otherwise we're forced to take your license. So they okay,
Yeah.
I go under oath. I look at the race and I says, "Well, what about it?" And he says, "Well, the favorites finished 6th, 7th, and 8th." I says, "Well, what do you want? It's a fucking $3,000 claimer. It's been raining all day. They scraped the track. The track is hard as a rock. These 3,000 claimers, every one of them is lame. And they probably couldn't handle the." He says, "Yeah, but the crowd was booing." I says, "Well, the crowd was booing. The favorites finished out, but there's a reason why the favorite." Okay, now the hammer comes down. "Did you bet on the race?" And I says, "I don't know if I bet on the race. That was a month ago. What do I know? I don't know. I was there with my mother. I'm betting $2 tickets. I don't remember if I bet on the race. But if you want to put this thing to bed, tell me how to answer this thing on the record, and I'll answer it however you want so you can close this investigation like you said you wanted. You said you needed a professional opinion. I just gave you one. No, we need to know if you." Anyway, they forced me to say I didn't bet. And they had the teller there that they already had the teller, and the teller was a real nice girl who knew me, but Her husband was the one that worked for the tote machine company, and they just signed a $3 million contract to replace all the machines in Monticello with the new tote machines. And they told her that if she didn't identify me, that they would cancel the contract. So she identified me, and that was that. Now, they called me in again. Right then they says, you're barred. You lied. We have this girl. You lied. And that's why I appealed it. Okay. Now, while I'm appealing this, I appeal it. Now, my owners come to me and they said, Larry, now these are the owners that come to me from Charles Slutsky, Alan August, Larry Kadish, Andy Beleza, all heavyweight guys that came to me after I got even with all the Shylocks and all the mob guys. And then I was on my way from 78 to 84. That's when I had everything. And I was on my way to superstardom. And they came to me and they says, what are you doing? Give up these guys. These guys been in Monticello now for their whole life. They don't have 5 cents. Half of them are living in tack rooms. And I says, I can't do that. I just can't rat on these guys. And they says, well, look, we'll all chip in. Give them $200,000 each. There's 4 of them. Give 4 guys $200,000 each. And I said, I can't do that. I just can't. So I think it was Cage or I forget who it was that come to me and says that, what about us? Not only are you ruining your whole career, what about us, the guys who invested millions in you and this and that and everything else? And I says, you're right. I says, but I can't do it. I'm going to take my chance and fight it in court. Well, I fought in court and I lost. And these guys that were my best friends, I disappointed them. They got very angry at me. And maybe I should have went to these guys, these 4 guys, and says, listen, I'll give you 200,000 each if you let me say that you were the guys that come and told me. And maybe they would have said yes. I don't know, but I didn't do that. So is that what he's talking about? Yeah, that's what. Yeah, that's what this was about. This. Yeah. Okay. All right. So I answered that question.
I've been asked if you have any stories about Eddie Lohmeyer or Catello Manzi.
Eddie Lohmeyer and Catello Manzi, two real good friends, 2 real good guys, excellent trainers, excellent drivers, everything excellent. Eddie now I think is kind of semi-retired. He married a veterinarian, real good vet, and just 2 good guys that started out when they were kids. In fact, Lohmeyer, he was in the. In fact, I could be wrong, but I think, in fact, if Eddie's watching, he could call me and yell at me for saying something wrong. But I think his father had a horse called Cry Jimmy that he was going to give to Eddie, and he needed a stall, and I think I gave him one of my stalls. It was something like that, but I was stabled right next to Eddie Lohmeyer's father, who told me the wise words: don't walk if you can run, don't stand if you can sit, and something like that. Really good guy, funny guy. And then Eddie come around, and Eddie's really nice guy. And Catello, same thing, 2 good guys. In fact, Catello's father and his whole family raced there. His father, all his uncles and his cousins, everybody. They must have 10 guys that raced there before Catello. And I remember when Catello's father come to me when Catello first got his license. And he says, look, leave my son alone. Now, me and his father, Al, were good friends. We raced. And his father says, just leave my son alone. Don't ask him, and we never bothered him. But he was the kind of guy that he was one of them guys that just by talking to him, you knew, just leave him be, just leave him be. Good guy and a good friend.
And how about Benny Webster? Any stories or any your experiences with him?
I have many Benny stories. There's two that stands out. One that you're gonna say because you tell it better than me because you know for sure you were there and I wasn't. The one that I know of was when I was gonna offer them the $300,000 in the little brown jug to let me go, but I won't get into that. But you tell that story about Benny and the coat.
The coat. It was Christmas season, and Benny had gone down to Manhattan and picked up a fur coat for someone. And then before he left the city, he decided he was going to stop for lunch. And at that time in Manhattan, they had like municipal parking garages.
Now, but wait, let me just stop you right there. Just so you know, the people that don't know Benny. Benny Webster is the kind of guy that a real party guy and a real money to him didn't mean nothing. If he met a girl, the next day he bought her a brand new car. If he really liked the girl, he'd buy her a house. That was Benny Webster. Go ahead.
So Ben goes into the municipal garage, leaves his car, he goes, has lunch. When he gets back over there, the back window is broken and the coat is gone. Benny gets in the car, drives back to the furrier, says, I need another one of those coats. And that's $5,000, took it out of his pocket and bought another one. That was Benny.
That was Benny.
And the rest of our Benny stories will probably get the podcast struck by YouTube. So we really can't tell anymore.
Yeah. Let me just say this. A couple of podcasts back, somebody asked me about Jeff LaPluff. And I didn't know if he was a friend or whatever. Anyway, I told about Jeff LaPluff that he was an arrogant little brat that thought he knew everything more than about and he claimed a horse. I trained a horse called the Eye of the Tiger for Ralph Gigani, and Billy O'Donnell raced him for me, and he won, and he got claimed, and LaPluff claimed him. They happened to be in the dining room with me and Ralph, and he come over to the table like just an arrogant jerk, and he says, "I'll make sure I lower his because he just won. I'll make sure I lower that mark or something like that."
Yeah,
and I just looked at him like a jerk. Anyway, the guy sends me a letter. I got it, and he said, "Larry, you were talking about Jeff LaPluff. The reason why he was jailed and suspended for life was that he was killing horses for insurance money. He was the worst kind of person, as you know." And that
sums him up pretty good.
That sums him up pretty good.
And Tommy Stiggs saying, "Good evening."
Tommy, I thought I have it down pat, but you know what I forgot to do tonight? I did the entrance perfect, but I forgot to hit live. So the first 5 minutes that I was on, I wasn't live. So then I just hit live, but the whole intro I'm missing. So, but I'll get it. You want me to answer? Yeah, I have a bunch of questions here. Do you want me to end it, or you want me to?
What do we got? How long have we been going?
A guy asked me about jockeys and jockey agents because I'm getting a lot of phone calls. They won't come on, but they call me because I gave my phone number out for that guy that said he was going to get me a trainer to come on here. They want to know about jockeys, how much they get paid, and jockey agents, and
PJ maybe would come on.
Who's PJ?
Johnny Campo's son is a top agent.
He's still training?
No, he's been in he worked in administration, the race office.
When he first came around after his father died, he's a little short, chubby guy, right? Yeah. He came around, and I think he was in the same barn with me, and I don't think he didn't do much good, but then you're telling me that he went
on. He's an agent now, and
he's a jockey's agent.
Good, yeah. I don't know who he represents. He's I thought his father was a great guy.
His father was a lot of stories about his father too.
Yeah,
many stories.
we would get struck because
Yeah, I know. There's
Johnny,
many
yeah.
different ways you can go. There's different depending on what lane you want to go down. Anyway, they asked me about jockeys and jockey agents. A jockey gets 10% of whatever purse that they win, and out of that 10%, he has to pay his agent 25% of that 10%. So that's how both of them get paid. And the jockey's agent, that's a tough gig, boy. Them poor guys. I used to be I go to the barn early every morning, but them guys almost have to go around like begging, unless you have really a top rider that's in demand. But if you don't, you're going to trainers begging just to get a mount, and then if the horse finishes fourth or fifth, and the trainer makes an excuse, and then he has to take you off, and you see the jockeys begging trainers to please give me another shot at it. I feel so bad. Unless an agent, that's a tough job. You got to go. And for the most part, the agents that have the roughest time, who I feel sorry for, because the top agents have riders that are in demand. The trainers are calling the agents. They don't even have to go to the barn. But the guys with lesser jockeys or newer jockeys, they have to go begging. And I used to sit there and just feel so bad that the trainer use their jockey on a horse that had no shot. Then the trainer blames the jockey for the horse finishing last. When the owner says, what happened? He says, the guy gave him wrong or gave him a bad ride. And then that wasn't true, but the agent is still trying to get the guy back on the horse. And they're like, it's a tough gig. I remember just about every retired jockey tried to become an agent. Some of them were very, like Cordero, very, very successful, got the leading guy in the world. But some of them, they try it, and they're just not successful, and they go into training and they're not successful, and some of them just fade away,
And the jockeys have to pay their valet as well.
Yeah, but the valets, they give me either $100 because one valet might take care of the tax of 10 guys, so they're not really on
I thought they had their own.
Well, so the big ones do, yeah, the big ones do, but that's not I don't think it's a percentage thing. I think it's they make their own deal.
Team Bitcoin says our next guest should be Jason Service.
Oh God. There's so many things, there's so many stories that's why when we were talking, I was talking with Nicholas Pileggi and Richard Price about the movie. This is in 2019. And I was telling them stories because we had a big catered affair luncheon with all of us. And they said, none of this is in the book. And I says, what's in the book is bullshit. It's 1% of what happened. I mean, you start getting into these stories like you're talking about and get into the Barrera stories and the Woody Smith stories they stories out there that the average guy, in fact, the guy who runs Past the Wire, it's a real good podcast and he's a really nice guy, but I was never invited back on there because I said a couple of things that he didn't like about some of the trainers that he was very friendly with, because he has access to all of them guys, and I can understand it, but the truth is the truth. And if you just want to look on the look, everybody, I said this a million times, everybody has a closet door, everybody, and there's many that in the horse business, both in standardbreds and thoroughbreds, both trainers, drivers, and jockeys, that don't ever want that door open. And you know, that's it. Most of what I say is documented stuff that been, you know, I don't talk about Cordero or Baeza or Eddie Maple or these guys because I'm making it up. It's in the newspapers. It was in the newspapers. So anyway, you got something else you want to call? It's been an hour and 10 minutes, and Tommy Stiggs says don't ever under no conditions go over an hour because they'll tune out. So it's been an hour or something. Cut it, end it. Yeah?
Yes.
Okay. All right, folks, that's it. We're going to come back again on Tuesday at 8 o'clock. We're going to do 2 shows a day. Now, another thing.
2 shows a week.
Two shows a week. Tommy Stiggs, if you're still listening, I tune on your show. He has a great, if you're up at 7 o'clock in the morning, you have to tune into Tommy Stiggs. He has a podcast. It goes on every morning.
Tommy Stiggs Social Club.
Tommy Stiggs Social Club. It's on YouTube. It's great. He just talks about everything, and he talks back and forth with the people. I don't know how he does it, but I tune in just about every morning. And the other morning, he says the mob genre is done. It's all done. The rating, the views are getting less and less and less and less. And so
Tommy says I'm here.
Okay. So Tommy, I heard you when you said that, and I just want you to know that I feel a little bit encouraged because when Michael Franchise just interviewed that crazy kid, they got 80,000 views within 2 hours, and so my views went up to about 300. So how many am I short before I can catch up? So, but I'm keeping track of that now. So, but anyway, Tommy's a great guy. You should all tune in to his podcast in the morning. Very, very entertaining, and he's a great guy. And he's responsible for me doing these lives because he showed me how to do it. He wrote it all down, and I should have it down pat. I almost have it down pat, but it was and he offered to come here all the time on Tuesday, but I need to do it by myself, and I got it. I just keep forgetting it because there's like 5 buttons that you got to hit back and forth, and I'll get it anyway.
Well, maybe we could ask people to hit one button, the like button, and the subscribe.
Oh yeah, yes.
The ever popular bell.
Yeah, and the other podcast, the Mob Podcast, they have 1 million subscribers, and I'm just 990,000 shorter subscribers.
Yeah.
So
a couple of weeks.
Yeah, so as the mob genre takes a nosedive, I'll be rising through the ranks. But anyway, all kidding aside, Tommy's a good guy. He's responsible for that Joey Molino show, which is the hottest show right now on YouTube, and he does a great job. And he's a funny guy, and he's Joey's responsible for that. Anyway, that's it. Now I know I have to hit this closing, Larry Rolla closing. So I'm going to close, and thanks for tuning in. And keep your cards and letters coming. And like I said, every week, this is every question so far is a horse question. I mean, if you whatever you want to talk about, you could talk about my life, parts of my life, what happened when I met with Sony Pictures and Village Roadshow, what happened when I met with some of these mobsters, how was my relationship with John Gotti when I bought him the horse. You could talk about any of that stuff. But if you want to talk about the horses, that's fine with me. I just wish that you you can get me a thoroughbred trainer to come on. I learned how to bring somebody on. I learned how to send a link. I learned how to do all of that stuff. So somebody get me a thoroughbred trainer that's willing to come on, have a friendly conversation, because I just like to ask certain basic questions. Why about the training methods of the thoroughbred racehorse. And okay, that's it. Thank you, folks. I'll talk to you Tuesday at 8 o'clock.